Welcome, and thank you for choosing to spend your time here in this quiet place of rest. This story has been created as a gentle sanctuary, a soft space for your mind to settle and find peaceful contentment as you prepare for sleep. If you find comfort in our journey together, a simple like, a subscription to the channel, or a kind comment is always deeply appreciated. Tonight we will be visiting the Valley of Stillness, a hidden haven where the very earth hums a soft, warm lullaby. Here we will follow a gentle mapmaker as he charts the land not by its sights, but by its feeling of profound peace. Prepare to be soothed by the scent of warm soil, the touch of felt-like bark, and the soft pulsing glow of twilight flowers in a world designed for pure and simple respite. Chapter 1. The Threshold of Stillness. It is a quiet and wonderful thing to find a place that has been waiting for you. For Orin, the mapmaker, that place was a gentle cleft in the earth that seemed to breathe a warm, welcoming sigh. He had walked for a very long time, and his feet, shod in soft, well-worn leather, were quite ready for a bit of a rest. The path he had followed, a mere suggestion of a trail through fields of tall, whispering grasses, had simply ended here, at the base of two truly enormous trees. They stood like gentle sentinels, their bark so thick and furrowed it looked less like wood and more like the hide of some ancient sleeping creature, soft and forgiving to the touch. He reached out a hand, feeling the surprising warmth and yielding texture beneath his palm, and a sense of profound peace began to settle over him, as soft and quiet as falling dust. He stepped between the two great trunks, and the world seemed to change in a single silent breath. The chirping of faraway birds, the rustle of the wind in the distant grasses, all the small sounds of the wider world simply fell away. They were not blocked by a wall, but rather absorbed into a quiet so deep and pervasive it felt like a physical presence, a soft blanket settling over his shoulders. Before him, a small valley unfolded, a perfect basin of gentle green slopes and impossibly lush foliage, and from the ground itself, through the soles of his soft boots, he could feel it, a faint, low vibration, a hum so deep it was almost not a sound at all, but a feeling of warmth and life that seemed to make the very air tremble with contentment. The valley floor was covered in a thick, springy turf that cushioned his every step, making his slow progress feel almost weightless. The air smelled clean and sweet, a pleasant mingling of fertile earth and something akin to warm honey, a scent that was both comforting and new. Dotted across the landscape were plants unlike any he had seen, with wide paddle-shaped leaves of a pale, serene green that sighed softly as a languid current of air passed over them. It was here, nestled amongst a small cluster of these gentle giants, that he found the dwelling. It was a simple structure made of a pale, smooth wood that seemed to have been worn by centuries of gentle rain, its rounded corners and low roof making it appear as though it had grown from the earth itself. The door was unlocked, as one might expect in a place that held no notion of hurry or worry. It opened with a soft sigh of wood against wood, and the air inside was cool and still. It smelled of old, dry herbs and the clean scent of packed earth, a fragrance that spoke of long, quiet histories and simple, peaceful lives. A simple wooden chair sat by a small, unadorned window, and a low sleeping platform was covered with what looked like thick, woven blankets of dried grasses, soft and fragrant. Oren felt the last of the day's journey release its hold on him, a long, slow exhalation of breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He set down his light satchel, its contents little more than a rolled sheet of soft paper and some powdered pigments, and felt he had truly, finally, arrived. As the light outside began to fade, deepening from a soft gold to a gentle violet, Oren sat in the simple chair and watched the valley transform. It was then that he noticed the flowers. They grew in small clusters near the base of the large-leaved plants, their bell-shaped heads having been closed tightly during the day. Now, as twilight settled, they began to open, and from within their pale petals, a soft, buttery light began to pulse. It was a gentle, rhythmic glow, waxing and waning in a slow, hypnotic cadence that seemed to be in perfect harmony with the deep, humming vibration he could feel rising from the valley floor. The soft light of the Lumina flora, for he could think of no better name for them, cast long, slowly dancing shadows across the turf. The world became a place of soft edges and gentle movement, a living tapestry of warm light and deep, velvety darkness. The honeyed scent in the air grew a little stronger, a sweet and soporific perfume that invited rest. Oren felt his eyelids grow heavy, the pleasant weight of a day well spent and a night of profound peace about to begin. The valley did not feel empty. It felt held, and he, in turn, felt held by it. He moved from the chair to the sleeping platform, finding the woven grass matting to be surprisingly comfortable, yielding to his form and cradling him completely. Through the window he could see the gentle pulsing of the flowers, a silent, natural lantern lighting the way to slumber. He closed his eyes and the world became the feeling of warmth seeping up from the earth below, a gentle, cradling heat that soothed his tired limbs and quieted his mind. The hum was clearer now, a deep, resonant lullaby that vibrated through the very wood of the shelter and into his bones. It was the sound of the earth breathing, slowly and contentedly, and Oren let his own breath fall into the same peaceful rhythm. There was no need for thought, no room for worry. There was only the warmth, the soft pulsing light beyond his closed eyelids, and the deep, unending hum. It felt like coming home to a place he had never been before, a state of being that was pure and simple rest. He felt his body grow heavy and wonderfully still, sinking into the mattress, into the floor, into the very earth itself, as the last vestiges of awareness melted away like dew in the morning sun. Sleep came not as a sudden departure, but as a gentle welcome guest, invited in by the deep, warm cadence of the earth. Chapter 2. The Unfurling of the Senses. Oren awoke to a feeling, sensation that gently permeated his being before his eyes had even opened. It was a profound and utter restfulness, a quality of stillness that felt as though it had been woven into the very fabric of his sleep. There was no jarring return to the world, only a slow, soft surfacing into the warm, quiet air of the small shelter. The gentle warmth from the earth had been a constant, comforting presence through the night, a cradle of soothing energy that had allowed him to rest more deeply than he could remember. He lay for a long while, simply breathing, feeling the slow rhythmic hum of the valley as a pleasant, deep resonance within his own chest. It felt like the valley had tuned him to its own peaceful frequency. He rose slowly, feeling wonderfully light and supple, and pushed open the wooden door. The morning was cool and fresh, yet the ground beneath his bare feet was already pleasantly warm, a constant, gentle comfort. The valley was bathed in a soft, diffused light, the sun's rays filtering through a high, thin layer of cloud that acted as a perfect canopy, preventing any harsh glare. He decided that today would be a day of simple exploration, not with the mind of a mapmaker seeking to measure and define, but with the quiet curiosity of a welcome guest. His purpose was not to chart, but simply to feel, to listen, and to see. His hands became his primary tools of discovery. He ran his palms over the impossibly soft texture of the wide, paddle-like leaves that grew in abundance, their surfaces feeling like cool, smooth suede. He knelt and touched the earth itself, a rich, dark soil that was springy and alive beneath his fingers, carrying that same constant, gentle warmth. He found a large, fallen log near the center of the valley, its wood worn smooth by time into a silvery, polished surface. He sat upon it, feeling the warmth of the sun and the warmth of the earth meet and mingle, and spent a good hour just watching the slow, gentle dance of the broad leaves in the barely there breeze. Following a sound, a murmur so quiet it was almost imperceptible, he found the source. It was a slow-moving brook, its water so clear he could see the smooth, pale clay of its bed. He knelt at its edge and dipped his fingers in, surprised to find the water was not cold, but pleasantly warm, almost tepid. It carried the sweet, clean scent of the soil and the roots it flowed through, a pure and living fragrance. He watched as small, iridescent insects with wings like spun glass hovered over its surface for a moment before drifting away, their movements unhurried and serene. The brook made a soft burbling sound as it moved over the gentle contours of the land, a sound that harmonized perfectly with the deeper hum of the earth. It was by this warm, murmuring brook that he saw her. A woman was tending to a small patch of the Lumina flora, which in the daylight were closed into tight, pale buds. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace that seemed to be a part of the valley's own rhythm, her bare feet making no sound on the soft turf. She looked up as Orin approached, her expression one of gentle welcome. She had kind eyes and a serene face, and she offered him a small, simple smile. This, Orin felt, must be Periwinkle. There were no words exchanged, for none were needed in that profound quiet. He returned her smile and gave a slow, respectful nod, an acknowledgement of their shared peace. She gestured with one hand towards the patch of flowers, then towards the warm brook, a simple movement that seemed to say, "This is how they thrive." It was a quiet lesson in the interconnectedness of this gentle place, the warmth of the earth, the warmth of the water. It all flowed into the life of these wondrous, light-giving plants. He understood. Periwinkle then offered him a single, perfectly smooth, leaf-shaped piece of dried fruit from a pouch at her side. Its taste was subtly sweet and wonderfully comforting. He accepted with another nod of thanks, and the two of them stood for a moment in comfortable shared silence, listening to the cadence of the valley together. As the day began to wane, Oren made his way back towards his small shelter, his heart full of a quiet, simple contentment. He had learned so much without asking a single question. He had charted the feel of the leaves, the temperature of the water, the texture of the soil, all within his own memory. He had felt the warm and open spirit of the valley reflected in the simple, kind gesture of its other inhabitant. The experience was a map of feeling, a cartography of pure sensation. Back in his shelter, as the violet hues of twilight once again settled over the valley, he watched the Lumina blooms begin to open and pulse with their soft, buttery light. The rhythmic glow seemed even more beautiful now, knowing the quiet care that went into their keeping. He ate another piece of the sweet, dried fruit Periwinkle had given him, its flavor a perfect end to a perfect day. He settled onto his sleeping platform, feeling the deep hum of the earth welcome him once more. Tonight, the familiar lullaby was joined by a feeling of gentle companionship, a quiet knowing that he was not alone in this peaceful, hidden world. Chapter 3. Charting the Warmth. A new kind of morning dawned for Oren, one filled not just with rest, but with a gentle sense of purpose. Today, he would begin his true work, the creation of a map unlike any he had ever conceived. He took the large, rolled sheet of paper from his satchel, its surface soft and fibrous like a pressed leaf. He carried it outside to the large fallen log, whose smooth, flat surface made a perfect, sun-warmed table. Spreading the paper out, he anchored its corners with 4 small, smooth pieces of fallen wood. For a mapmaker who had spent a lifetime working with precise inks and sharp pens, the tools he now laid out felt wonderfully elemental and true to this place. They were small pouches of powdered pigments, ground from the dried petals of nameless flowers, soft clays, and vibrant pollens he had gathered. He began without hesitation, for he was not charting a world he needed to discover, but one he was already beginning to feel. He chose to forego the idea of a border or a scale, for this map was to represent a feeling, not a distance. He started with the hum, the very soul of the valley. Taking a pinch of rich, ochre-colored dust, he let it fall onto the center of the paper. With the soft pad of his thumb, he began to spread it outwards in a great circular motion, pressing the pigment into the fibers of the sheet. He worked slowly, his eyes closed, focusing on the deep, resonant vibration he could feel through the log up from the earth. Where the hum felt strongest, he pressed harder, the color becoming a deep, warm heart. Where it softened, his touch became lighter, the ochre fading into a gentle aura. Next, he sought to capture the meandering path of the warm brook. For this, he used a pale blue dust he had found in a deposit of soft clay near the water's edge. He did not draw a line to represent the brook's banks. Instead, he sought to capture the sensation of the cool, moist air that hung just above its surface. He let the fine blue powder drift from his fingers onto the paper, following the memory of the brook's gentle curves. Then he blew upon it softly, his breath guiding the pigment into a soft, hazy band that looked like a whisper of morning mist a perfect representation of the water's gentle, cooling presence against the warmth of the land. The sun was high and the air was still as he worked, his movements becoming a slow meditative dance. He remembered the feeling of the felt-barked sentinels at the valley's entrance. For them, he used a deep, earthy brown pigment mixed with a touch of soft green pollen. He did not draw trees, but instead made two large, soft thumbprints at the edge of his growing map. He pressed down firmly, then smudged the edges, trying to recreate the sensation of their solid yet yielding presence, the feeling of safety and quiet welcome they offered. The marks on the paper were not shapes, but impressions of feeling, a chart of tactile memory. He paused his work to eat, sitting on the warm ground and enjoying the simple flavors of some nuts and berries he had foraged, their tastes clean and bright. He watched Periwinkle in the distance, moving among her flowers, her quiet diligence a comforting and constant presence in the landscape. Her own work was a kind of mapping, too, he thought, a tending of the valley's gentle light. Her presence was a part of this world's texture, and he knew his map would be incomplete without acknowledging it. As dusk began to approach, he turned to his final task for the day, charting the rhythmic, soft pulsing of the Lumina blooms. This was perhaps the most difficult sensation to capture. He chose a pigment of the palest yellow, ground from sun-dried petals. He did not try to mark the location of each cluster of flowers. Instead, he wanted to map their light, their very cadence. He dipped his little finger into the yellow dust and, where he remembered seeing the flowers, he pressed a small, soft point onto the paper. Then, around each point, he drew a series of faint, concentric circles, each one softer and more delicate than the last, like ripples of light expanding in the twilight air. He stood back as the real Lumina flowers began their evening display, their soft butter-yellow light pulsing in the deepening shadows. He looked from the glowing blooms to his map, and a deep sense of satisfaction filled him. The paper held no lines, no names, no symbols an outsider would understand. Yet to him, it was a perfect representation of his day. It was the feeling of warmth, the whisper of cool air, the welcome of the ancient trees, and the gentle rhythmic pulse of living light. It was not a map of a place, but a map of peace itself. As he carefully rolled the precious sheet and returned to his shelter, the air was growing cool, but the ground remained wonderfully warm beneath his feet. The hum of the earth seemed to approve of his work, its resonance feeling a little deeper, a little more soothing than before. He settled onto his sleeping platform, the images of the soft pigments and gentle shapes still vivid in his mind. He was not merely observing the valley anymore. He was in conversation with it, learning its language and speaking back in a dialect of color and touch. Sleep found him easily, wrapped in the quiet satisfaction of a day spent in peaceful, creative communion. Chapter 4. The Language of the Valley. The passage of time in the valley was like the flow of its warm brook, a gentle and continuous movement without sharp markers. Days blended one into the next, each a unique shade of peace, yet all part of the same tranquil whole. Oren's work on his sensory map continued, but the map itself became less of an object and more of a practice, a way of deepening his connection to the world around him. He found he no longer needed to consult the paper to know the land, for he was beginning to learn the cadence of the valley by heart. The map was already written within him. He learned to read the subtle shifts in the earth's warm hum, a language that spoke of deep, slow life. In the morning, the hum felt brighter, a touch more vibrant, as if the land itself were awakening. In the deep quiet of the afternoon, it settled into a low, steady drone, a sound of pure contentment. He discovered that by placing his palm flat against the trunk of one of the great, felt-barked trees, he could feel the hum more clearly, a pure and soothing vibration that seemed to travel up his arm and settle near his heart, a profoundly calming sensation. One afternoon, he forsook his mapping work entirely and went to sit with his back against one of these ancient trees, choosing a spot that overlooked the gentle sweep of the valley. He simply sat, his purpose only to be present. He listened to the sigh of the air moving through the broad paddle-shaped leaves, a sound so soft and rhythmic it was like listening to the slow, deep breathing of a sleeping giant. He observed the light, how its soft, diffused quality made every color seem gentle and kind, without a single harsh edge or dark corner anywhere in sight. The world felt utterly safe, completely at ease with itself. After a while, a soft footfall on the turf announced Periwinkle's approach. She carried two simple, handleless ceramic cups that let out a faint wisp of fragrant steam. She offered one to Orin with a gentle smile, and he accepted it with a grateful nod. The cup was warm in his hands, and the liquid inside was a pale green infusion that smelled of sweet grasses and clean, warm soil. They sat together in comfortable silence, their backs against the soft, forgiving bark, and sipped the warm drink. The taste was as gentle as its scent, a comforting warmth that spread through his chest, mingling with the warmth of the earth. There was no need for conversation, for they were already sharing in a deep communion. They watched together as a cluster of pale, downy seeds drifted from one of the larger plants, catching the air current and floating in a slow, meandering ballet across the valley. They observed the gentle rhythm of their shared world, their quiet presence a part of its landscape. It was a simple moment, yet it felt profound, a perfect expression of the valley's gift, the peace that comes from shared stillness. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long, soft shadows across the turf, they watched the Lumina flora begin their evening ritual. From their spot on the hill, they could see the little clusters of light begin to pulse, one by one, until the valley floor was decorated with dozens of gently glowing beacons. Periwinkle let out a soft, appreciative sigh, a sound that was barely audible yet full of deep affection for her home. She had seen this sight every evening of her life, yet she watched with a quiet wonder that was fresh and new. When she finally rose to leave, she placed a hand briefly on Orin's shoulder, a simple, warm gesture of companionship. He watched her walk back towards her own small dwelling, her form moving gracefully through the gentle, pulsing lights. Orin remained for a while longer, the empty cup still warm in his hands. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the valley's peace, but for its quiet welcome, for its gentle way of teaching him to listen not with his ears, but with his whole being. He was learning the language of the valley, and it was a language made of warmth, light, silence, and simple, shared kindness. He returned to his shelter feeling wholly content, his mind quiet and his spirit serene. The map lay rolled in the corner, but he did not feel the need to add to it tonight. Tonight's experience could not be captured with pigments. It could only be held in the heart. As he lay down to sleep, the hum of the earth felt like a familiar friend. Its deep, resonant lullaby a promise of another night of perfect, undisturbed rest, wrapped in the valley's gentle and unwavering embrace. Chapter 5. A Map Made of Peace. In the soft light of a new morning, Orin unrolled his map for the last time. It lay upon the smooth log, a beautiful and abstract tapestry of the senses. The rich ochre of the earth's hum pulsed at its center, surrounded by the hazy blue of the brook's cool breath and the gentle, concentric ripples of the Lumina's light. It was a complete work, a perfect portrait of feeling. As he looked upon it, he felt a sense of quiet, profound fulfillment, the kind of satisfaction that settles deep in the bones and brings a gentle smile to the lips. The peace he had been charting was now a part of him, resonating with the very hum of the earth he had sought to capture. He realized then that the map was never the true goal. The purpose had been in the making of it, the act of sitting in stillness, of closing his eyes to truly feel the warmth, of listening with such focused intent that the world's quietest sounds became a symphony that had been the journey. The map was simply a beautiful reminder of the peace he had found by paying gentle attention. He felt no need to add to it, nor to take it with him when he eventually left. Its home was here, in the valley that had inspired it. He spent the day in quiet reflection, moving through the valley with a new sense of belonging. He was no longer a visitor, but a part of its gentle rhythm. He waded for a time in the warm brook, the water swirling softly around his ankles, the smooth clay of the stream bed yielding slightly under his feet. He laid his cheek against the felt-like bark of one of the great sentinel trees, closing his eyes and simply feeling the solid, ancient life within it, the slow pulse of its being in harmony with the hum of the land. Every sensation was a verse in the valley's silent poem. In the late afternoon, Periwinkle found him by the water's edge. She carried a small woven basket, from which she produced several large, soft leaves. Without a word, she began to wrap his sensory map within them, her movements careful and reverent. She understood, he realized, that his work here was done. She then led him to a hollow at the base of one of the great trees, a small protected alcove within its massive root structure. Together they placed the wrapped map inside, a quiet offering returned to the land that had created it. It was a perfect, peaceful conclusion. As twilight began to weave its violet threads into the golden tapestry of the late afternoon, Orin knew it was time for a deep and final rest in this place. He returned to his simple shelter, the air filled with the sweet, honeyed scent of the Lumina flora preparing for their nightly display. He felt a profound sense of completeness, a quiet joy that asked for nothing more than what was. The valley had given him a gift far greater than a subject for a map. It had given him a deep, internal stillness that he could now carry with him wherever he went. He settled onto his sleeping platform, pulling the soft, fragrant grass blanket over him. Through the small window, the world was a masterpiece of gentle beauty. The rhythmic, buttery glow of the flowers pulsed in a slow, hypnotic dance, a silent lullaby of light. The air was perfectly still, and the only sound was the deep, resonant hum of the earth, a sound he now felt as the beating of his own contented heart. He was enveloped by the valley, by its gentle warmth, its soft light, and its profound quiet. He closed his eyes, a feeling of immense gratitude washing over him. He breathed in the sweet air, and with a long, slow exhalation, he released the last vestiges of his old life, of striving and seeking. He had found what he was looking for, not in a place on a map, but in a state of being. He was warm, he was safe, and he was at peace. His body felt heavy and wonderfully relaxed, sinking into the support beneath him, held securely by the gentle earth. The hum was his final thought, a deep and resonant wave of tranquility that carried him effortlessly into a sleep so deep and restorative, it felt like a return to the very source of stillness itself.